You're listening to STP Radio.
Welcome back to STP Radio. I'm your host, Smita Mishra, and I'm excited to conduct another interview with one of the upcoming speakers at our Spring 2017 STPCon conference. In case you have not signed up yet, STPCon will be in Phoenix, Arizona from March 14th through 17th this year. And if you reach out to me, I can share a discount code for your registration. Be sure to check out stpcon.com, where you can learn more about the conference, the speakers, our special events, and our conference pricing. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Look for SoftwareTestPro on both of these social networks. So let's meet our guest for today. Today we have Connor Roberts with us. Connor, is that how you take your name?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Connor is a quality manager with over 11 years of testing experience, from building integration software to security testing and web services and test team management. His varied background has provided insight into multiple contexts and perspectives to aid in the build-out of high-value artifacts and other materials for testers. He has led testing projects within Agile, Scrum, Kanban, and other various software development environments. And in his current role, he's responsible for espousing the use of good practices based upon the contextual needs of the teams across the organization. Connor frequents in-person testing conferences and meetups when available, as well as engages heavily with the online community to advance the state of testing and move our craft forward. Connor's guiding light of testers, providing an act of service to others, is congruent with the talks and the content he provides and produces for the community. Welcome to STP Radio, Connor.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you with us, and tell us a little more about you and how you got into testing and anything you would like for the audience to know about you that I missed out in my introduction.
Yeah, sure. So I appreciate the introduction. I got into testing originally when I was shifting careers, and my wife was pregnant with our first child, who is almost 9 now. And I had been informally testing before that, but my first formal job in testing was at a security firm that made building integration software, and my wife worked there as the accountant, and they brought me on to help with the testing. So I ended up being pretty soon I was the only tester there, and it's a small company, 2 or 3 developers, and I was doing the testing, and eventually we expanded that out and got a little bit bigger. But it was very interesting because it was a lot of hardware and software testing. So my first formal entry into testing was pretty heavy on both sides. There was a lot of testing of security devices and RFID tagging systems and access entry boards and CCTV cameras and things like that, as well as the software that ran it on a Windows platform.
That's interesting. So you're talking about 10 years back, right?
Right. So, like I said, my first formal entry into testing was into hardware and software security.
Yeah.
And then I moved into financial software and automotive software. And there was when I ended up at DealerTrack and Cox Automotive, it was 30 or 40 companies underneath one big umbrella. So there was a lot of exposure to multiple parallels, right? We had web apps, we had phone apps, we had back-end services, inventory solutions, CRMs, front-end websites. So it was really a great my best experience so far was probably with DealerTrack and Cox Automotive, just because of the exposure. I felt like every day I was constantly learning something new, and I never went into work feeling like, we've got everything figured out. Like there was always a challenge, which is really what I kind of thrive on.
Wow, that's a very interesting range of work. And like today, we live in a world where many people are releasing apps every day, and it's becoming increasingly easier to do it. But it was not common for one of our friends to say that we have a new mobile app released for Apple. I mean, in today's day, it's not uncommon to have our friends say that we have a new mobile app released for Apple or Android or something. But this wasn't as common, especially in 90s or few years back even. And from what I learned about you, you released 2 programs on Texas Instruments website that ran on their graphic calculators.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, what got you interested in this, and how have you, have you been releasing any more programs or apps to the world since then, or that was it that you did?
So that was my stint in coding. It was very short-lived, but I really enjoyed it. So basically, what happened was I think I was in high school at the time, mid '90s. I was a freshman, and I'll be honest, not very focused, not very motivated at that time, and spent a lot of time on the calculator when I should have spent time studying, to be honest. And so writing apps directly on the calculator itself was something that I found really enjoyable. Now, I was using a lot of go-to statements, which now any developer will tell you that's a no-no. But it was really fun to kind of figure that out as I go. It was very much learning kind of by ear and by trial and by error, and just trying things out, seeing it, an exception get thrown and try to figure out what that was without any really formal coding or learning. So yes, on the TI's website, I think it's ticalc.org, I had released a couple of programs, one of which was a clone of an old program that was called After Dark, which, if anybody remembers from the 90s, After Dark was a screensaver program that would run on Windows machines. There may have been a Macintosh client back then, but it ran on Windows machines, to keep your screen from burning in, and it had a whole lot of really cool effects. And I tried to recreate, and I thought it was back then, what kind of challenge would it be to try to recreate those awesome graphical effects on a calculator that has no more than 3 megabytes of memory? So I thought it was a fun thing by using different mathematical calculations, sine, cosine, tangent. It would draw different things on the screen, and then the user could put in variables. So that was fun. But since then I haven't done much coding. That was more of a pass the time in my boredom at high school.
Yeah. So like today, when we release apps, we are able to see number of downloads and how people are using it. Was there any way of tracking if people used all those apps, and if anybody did anything with it, and any feedback you ever received or heard about them?
So mostly so the way that the calculators transferred apps back then locally was you had a cable that you would, hook between the calculators, and it looked exactly like a headphone jack on a male-to-male headphone jack on both ends, and you would just plug in, and I would share that around to other people. And the problem was that screensaver app that I wrote took up the entire memory of the phone. It took up all the space, and you couldn't do anything else while it was running. So people tended to put it on their phone, they'd play with it for a day, and then they'd realize, I actually need to use this for class, so I have to delete the app. But so I don't know if there was a lot of any widespread adoption outside of my school. It is on the website, and you can still go there and check the downloads. I haven't done that, but yeah, people in my classes would play with it to pass the time.
I have to admit, this is super interesting, and I would love to talk about it, but I know that we have to move on into the interview, so I'm going to move on to our next question. And before we start talking about your conference presentation, I wanted to ask you about this. Especially about your videography skills. I learned that you have edited over 50 wedding videos when you worked for an event entertainment company, and this is quite a task. However, you did mention that you have yet not finished your own wedding video from 2005. And I'm tempted to say that you need to get this done so that you make your wife happy, but I'll say that this shows your focus on helping others first before yourself. So what did you like about your role with the entertainment company, and did you take anything away from that role that helped you in testing?
It's fun, yes. So, yeah, it's a funny story. You'd think I would have had that done first, and yes, much to my wife's coaxing, it just hasn't happened. But yeah, so I would say at the company that I worked at, you were constantly changing hats. It was, one time we were doing photography, one time was videography, one time was DJ and music, and sometimes we were filming weddings, sometimes we were filming dance recitals or sporting events. And so it changed just every weekend. It was something different. And there were a lot of similarities that really helped a bit of my work ethic when it came to being able to shift priorities rapidly, especially when I worked at Dealertrack Cox Automotive. There was a whole lot of context switching. And I think, honestly, some of that might have prepared me for adopting the context-driven testing sort of mindset with, not everything that you do is going to have the exact same script or path to follow. There's not a checklist that fits every context. And I certainly learned that when I was doing video editing. I couldn't, you're not going to have flower petals on the screen when you're filming when you're editing a soccer event. But for a wedding video, that makes perfect sense. So there are definitely some parallels there. And I think a lot of what we do now in software testing really demands that we focus on context. There's the way the standards and the idea that there's a checklist that fits every situation or a silver bullet to fix all problems is just not there anymore. And so it falls on us to come up with those new solutions.
I think in wedding videos, the biggest context I have seen is who gets covered, and that's based, who gets covered in the video, and that's based on who hired the videographer.
Well, it's interesting you say that. We had a contract that said, this is artistic work, and you may love it, you may hate it, but we can't go back and redo the whole thing. We'd be working for pennies, and so we would allow a few edits. If there was something in the background they didn't like, we would take that out. But what we would try to do is pretty much, we had 2 or 3 people videoing, so we were able to kind of spread out and go to different areas and see what was going on. So we'd have a videographer hang out with the bride and the bridesmaids, and one hang out with the groom and the groomsmen, and then later, since all of that was happening simultaneously, we'd edit it so that you could see everything that went on. But yeah, so every now and then you would get that to happen. You would have the mother of the bride come over and say, no, don't film that uncle. He's always drunk and crazy, and we don't want him in the video. But you could edit that out later. They didn't understand that we film everything because you can never go back and redo it. So you just take as many pictures and video as you can, and then later you just use the stuff that's the best of the best.
Yes. So before I move on to your workshop thing, let me give you a tip. I have special skills on nagging my husband to get something done. So ask your wife to speak to me.
Oh my God. I don't think I'm going to do that. I want to put this off as long as I can.
Yeah. Okay. So I definitely hope your video gets edited and gets fixed. You have a workshop with us called The Future of Risk-Based Test Chartering. This talk was originally proposed as a session, but we saw the need for this to be a workshop with hands-on instruction. And many attendees will be able to relate to this workshop with the speed of delivery, the implementation of the agile approaches, and more organizations. There is a need to test fast and to ensure the best opportunity for a successful working product. The practice of looking over the risks to our project and prioritizing them so that the highest risk areas are focused on early is sometimes an art. There is a takeaway from this workshop that says, establish a strong vocabulary for the purpose of speaking confidently to stakeholders about the 3-part testing story. So can you explain the 3-part testing story and the many other things that you wish to share with the audience?
So when I talk about the 3-part testing story, what I'm talking about is what James Bach, Michael Bolton have coined as the testing braid. So a braid of hair, for example, 3 strands that you put together, 3 groupings, and they're all intertwined, and they all are required to make the braid successful, right? So the 3-part testing story, the first thing that you have to talk about when you're talking to stakeholders of any level, could be CEO, VP, could be product owners, people on the team, the end client, is you want to tell the product story. So the product story is the qualitative part. It's the bugs that we found, the failures, what works, what doesn't work, all of the qualitative evaluations of what happened as we were testing. And then you tell that to the people that are the stakeholders who matter, right? So we define quality as value to some person. Jerry Weinberg defined it that way, and then James and Michael came along later and said to some person who matters, right? Because at the end of the day, it's up to the stakeholders to decide what we push out and what goes live. So the first part of that braid is telling that product story. Which bugs did we find? What did we fix? How did that fail, or how might it fail? And then the second part of that story is make the product story credible. So tell the testing story of what you did. So what did you go through? How did you do it? What oracles did you use, right? Oracles are how we recognize problems. What heuristics, what guide words did we use? Heuristics, rules of thumb for evaluating and making a decision. Those are fallible, but at least be able to talk to stakeholders about what that means. And then the third part of the testing story is what was the quality of the testing? So how did that testing go? And the story you're trying to tell really has to have these three components. And that last part is key, because many times you might have a fantastic strategy of how you want to approach testing, but an environment went down or the database wasn't available and you couldn't do that testing that you wanted to do. So you need to be able to talk to that. And you need to be able to do this in a way that addresses any kind of stakeholder. So if a VP comes up and says, hey, I've got 2 minutes, you need your 1 minute elevator pitch of what happened for the past 2 weeks or month. You have to be able to tell that or show that through some form of visual artifact that is a lot easier to read than test cases. I mean, I have yet to find in my career a PO, a VP, C-level, anybody who wants to read through 100 test cases to find out what a tester actually focused on. And even if they read through the test cases, they're not going to get an idea of your priorities. They're not going to understand what you focused on most. They're not going to get an idea of what the risks really were. They're going to see a bunch of steps, and it's going to look pretty, and everything's going to be green. But it doesn't really tell them if there's a problem or if there's not a problem or if there's remaining risks or if there's things that we still need to discover. So that's the three-part testing story.
Cool. It actually sounds very exciting and very, very useful to testers in today's day. So I'm sure attendees would like to go to it, and I'm myself looking forward to attend it. One of the other things I've learned about you is that you are working on a process patent for artificially aging tone woods in musical instruments using a combination frequency bombardment within an echo vibration chamber. So you have further told me that your current roadblock is the inability to gain access to an electron scanning microscope. And I'm going to be honest with you, Connor. I've just read these words and I have no idea what you're talking about.
So let me put this in a frame. I've been a connoisseur of acoustic guitars over the past, since I started learning to play when I was 12. And I am obsessed with the fact that each different kind of tone wood, from spruce to maple to cedar to whatever, rosewoods and all different Brazilian types of imports and cocobolo, you name it, has different sounds based on not only when they're harvested, but what part of the world they came from. And these tone woods are very prized by guitar players that are, very savvy and specific on what they want when they're building out a custom guitar. So you've got cedar that's very mellow for a tone wood. You've got spruce, which is very bright and responsive. And when you pair those together based on the construction of the guitar, you get a very different type of sound. And there's this idea or this somewhat unproven thought in the community right now of guitarists that says guitars kind of like wine, they get better with time, they sound better. So an acoustic guitar bought back in 1975 sounds better today if it gets played regularly, because the wood ages over time and it starts sounding much more played in, kind of like a shoe, right? If you buy a shoe, the first day you wear it, it's not very comfortable. But after the first week or the first month of wearing it, it's kind of worn in and it's kind of used to the shape of your foot and it feels better. So there's a similar thought with the tone of guitars. And there's two lines of thoughts out there is with acoustic guitars anyway, that it's temporary, after you're done playing with it, the wood just tightens back up and relaxes depending on the temperature in the room, and it sounds the same as it did when you bought it. There's also another group of people that I'm kind of leaning toward that thinks over time it does get better, and I think you can artificially age it by using sound. There's some other products that have tried to do this by, you have speakers that you place on the guitar and you leave them running overnight connected to a audio or a tone or a constant sound source, and it's supposed to make your guitar sound better if you do that every day. So the idea with this process patent is, you'd think the hard part would be the actual paperwork, but the hard part is actually finding a way to measure the change in the wood, because this is happening at a molecular level. So the changing of the wood going from sounding one way to sounding another way, first off, it's very qualitative. It's not something I can put a number on, because you might like how it sounded before we aged the wood, and somebody might like it afterwards. So it's a matter of taste, but it's also a matter of trying to scientifically to measure that. And it may be a fool's errand. It may be impossible. But I feel that the roadblock right now is a normal microscope's not going to detect the difference. So an electron scanning microscope would see at the detail of at enough detail to see if there was a difference between, the wood in its original state and after it had been tonally aged for a given period of time.
Wow, that's some understanding about the instrument. I have no clue about any of these, but glad to hear about these. I really hope you are able to do it.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
So I'm sure you've seen the awesome program lineup that we have for this STPCon.
Yes.
So as you look over the keynotes, sessions, workshops, what are some of the things you are seeing there that interest you the most? And what are the things that you hope to take away from them?
Yeah, so there's going to be a workshop. There's going to be a workshop done by Jess Lancaster. It's on pair testing, and that's something that I'm always trying to push and advocate to my teams is you don't have to wait for development to be finished to start testing. Testing is not a phase that comes after development or after the programming phase, right? We're even moving away from saying development, because everybody is a developer. So testers, product owners, coders, right? We're all developing the product. So testing, what we're trying to do these days is get testing to overlap with development from day one of the sprint, or day one of when you even start ideating on what you think the product's going to be in the design phase. So pair testing is something that testers can do before code is complete, so they can start testing sooner and more often. Right now, you have a lot of companies that are running into this problem. Oh, testers don't have enough time. Well, testers have plenty of time, but many times they're not using that time wisely. Sometimes they just don't know how to use it wisely, and they need to be exposed to these workshop ideas like pair testing and be taught how to do it. And then they can actually do testing earlier on. They can inform the developer of kind of where they're headed with their test strategy, which is a little bit of what I'll be talking about. But so I like to see some of these other congruent ideas. So pair testing is very much something that I'm in support of, and I'd love to see how other people have been doing it and what their experiences are, because I've got one way of doing it, and I know that other people have other ways that could provide insight. One of the other workshops or sessions that I was interested in had to do with automation. Now, automation is always a hot topic. You can't go to a testing conference or even a software development conference and avoid the topic of automation. So,
Absolutely.
Yes. So Melissa Tondi's doing one called, Automation, We're Doing It Wrong. So there's a lot of suites out there that are using automation to test their product, but they're doing it in a front-end way, and they're ignoring kind of the idea that, we need to have a foundation of unit tests and integration tests before we do the front-end functional UI test. So they've got that automation triangle flipped upside down, and there's, automation suites that take 10 to 12 hours to run. They're not usable. They can't be run frequently during the day. So it's hard to close the loop on getting feedback from what those automation suites are finding. and it just takes too long to get any information out of them. So I think that I really need to get some insight from some other professionals who are doing automation from kind of the ground up, starting at the unit test level, flushing that out, and then moving to integration, and then functional and black box pairing together, rather than the other way around. I think we need to flip the script on how we do automation. So that one interested me by Melissa, as well as the session by Anand Bagmar. He's doing one called Patterns of Good Test Automation Framework. So I feel like those two, Melissa Tondi's and Anand's sessions, would be very valuable kind of together as a pair. I would definitely attend both of those if I could.
In fact, you did pick a couple of my favorites, Connor. I really, really, really like Melissa Tondi's work all the time. And I've heard Anand's for sure because he's from India. So I've heard his sessions too. They are great. I hope you get to attend all of these and you enjoy them.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
And I have one final question for you to answer. So you have attended STPCon several times. At least I'm sure I saw you last time. So what is the one thing that you would like to tell the new visitors to the conference, what they can expect?
Okay, expect to have a challenge. My challenge when I went to STPCon was many times, and this is unavoidable because you guys have such great speakers, there was, if I could say so myself, there was overlapping things that I wanted to go to, right? So from 9 to 11, there was a talk I wanted to go through, and 9 to 11, there was another talk I wanted to go to. So if you're going and you happen to have a buddy or another coworker or a friend that's going with you, that's going to be a challenge if you're going on your own. But if you do have somebody you're going with, find out what those are and split them up and take notes for each other. Sometimes I would even record the sessions and then I'd go back and listen to them later on my phone. So go prepared with an app if you want to record the session. I found that when I listened to it later, I got a lot more out of it because then I could just focus at the time of the session and I could just listen and answer and ask questions, etc. But then when I went back and listened to it later, I heard a lot more. I took more notes. I got more out of it. So that's definitely a tactic I would use. Pair up with somebody, meet somebody there that you haven't met before, and say, "Hey, let's split these things up. I like these, you like those. Let's share notes." So I think you can get a lot more out of it because there's so much great stuff happening at the same time. If you find a buddy or pair up with somebody and share notes, so it's a fantastic conference for that.
Connor, thanks for your time today, and we are really looking forward to seeing you in Phoenix.
All right, thanks, Smita. Good to see you. I hope to see you soon.
Yes, same here. Well, everyone, I'm Smita Mishra, and this concludes our episode of STP Radio. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes coming soon. And if you haven't signed up yet for the conference, get out there and register. Thank you. See you all in Phoenix.
Thanks for listening to this episode of STP Radio, and stay tuned for more episodes. Learn more about the conference being held in Phoenix, Arizona, March 14th through 17th by visiting stpcon.com.